Now, Airbnb is telling its employees that they can now work from almost anywhere in the world. That too without a pay cut. Not just that, essentially, a bed and breakfast service Airbnb has committed to a handful of perks too, such as permitting up to 3 months of international work or travel from 170 countries that the company operates in.
Well, yes, Raksha, it's a strong, simple policy that so few large companies have had the guts to match. Now, other Silicon Valley biggies such as Google and Google parent Alphabet and Apple are urging employees to return to office, and this is the latest. Airbnb is also trying to go further than most to help its employees choose their own work model.
Absolutely, Archana. Brain Chesky today said that they'll all meet up regularly while they will have limited off-sites in 2022. But next year onwards, you can expect to gather in person every quarter for about a week at a time. Companies will be at a significant disadvantage if they limit their talent pool to a commuting radius around their offices. The best people live everywhere, and that is what Brian said today, Archana.
Right, all right. Let's introduce our guest panel on the broadcast. We are joined by Naman Pugalio's founder of Peppo Says, Raj Gopal Menon, VP Wazirex, Bhavish Sharma, and these are the guests on the broadcast. Raksha, before we go to the guest, I want to understand this from you is that for the longest time, we've, lived a life in a lockdown where a lot of people have either, demanded or vouched for a work from home model, or they say that no, going to office is one of the best deals. And now Airbnb boss has done something really amazing, and people like us who undertake a 1.5-hour commute to work every day would think of it as a nice precedent.
Yes, absolutely, Archana. And in fact, that's why we have some of the brightest minds from the industry. We have some new age entrepreneurs to shed some light on this topic. We can start with Naman, who's joining us in our Mumbai studio. Naman, what do you think? There are these new post-pandemic norms. Do you think in a country like ours, where, as Archana already mentioned, where, travel times are crazy and, amid the heat wave also, do you think that in a country like ours, we can incorporate this sort of a model too?
Sure. Look, I think this is an extremely interesting move, as you said, and it's actually across geographies that we're seeing this trend. And I'll perhaps pose a question to help us all understand why this is happening and how people adapt to a new normal. So let's assume in a city like Mumbai, which is where all of us are today, the local train workers striked. We would have no way but to figure out alternative ways to commute. And some of us who are habituated to taking local trains would perhaps find quicker, more efficient, faster, and perhaps even more economical ways of getting to work. So we would have all tasted a new reality, and some of us will choose to stick with it even once local trains resume. That's exactly what has happened over the past couple of years. Lots of companies, including mine, have gone fully remote because we see value in doing so. Now, one must remember there is, a host of balances to be struck when we think about going remote, and that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Simply because, companies like Airbnb, which have a sophisticated model, can afford to do so. Their product cycles are defined. Their employees largely know what to do. But if it's an early stage startup or it's a manufacturing firm, for them it's much harder to transition to a fully remote setup. And over the course of the last 2 years and more broadly, what has been happening is that a slew of technological innovations, right? The Airbnbs of the world, Uber, right? Digital payments. You have Slack. You have Twist and Todoist, a bunch of tools, Zoom, of course, which is the most talked about, product of recent times. All of these have made this transition easier. In fact, policy has also coped. So in countries like Estonia, you have, the e-worker policy. In Italy and Portugal, you have provinces and municipalities seeking to bring people back to rural areas, which is cheaper, more advantageous to people living there. Helps the ecosystem evolve. So I think this is a broad trend. It was waiting for a moment or a corridor to kind of make its presence felt, and that's exactly what we're seeing at the moment.
Thanks, Naman, for that. Yes, as a very interesting thing that you said, I want to take this back to Rajgopal Menon of Wazir X, who's joining us. Mr. Menon, Naman said something very interesting about how for an established company or an older company like Airbnb, this was possibly an easy route to take. What do you say about Wazir X? What are you guys doing right now? Is there a hybrid model? Are you supporting a model in which you can give lifelong work from home to your employees?
So Archana and Raksha, thanks for having us. So when I was doing my interview with Nichal Shetty, when he was hiring me, the two magic words that he said that actually sold me to Wazir X was always remote. So we are always going to be remote. So just to give you a perspective, we have about 250 plus employees who operate from 63 cities in India, from 23 states. So we are already remote, and we have no intention of ever going to a fixed office sort of a model. So the way we operate is, we have regular meetups. In fact, we just concluded a large, round of meetups in Bombay and Bangalore, and a bunch of our young guys, just completed a workathon in McLeodganj. So those are the perks of actually working from home. Because what we've done is actually we made, it was necessary for us because we operate, the crypto industry operates at the bleeding edge of technology. So to get these guys and to get them to relocate to either a Mumbai, a Bangalore, or a Delhi is next to impossible. This is the best perk that we are offering our employees. And this is, I think, one of the best retention tools that the HR has come up with. Most of our employees, actually 60% of our employees are under 30. They have the travel bug. And I just told you they went to McLeodganj, a bunch of 15 of them, and they were working out of McLeodganj for a week. I am working out of Sikkim right now. The benefits of work from home, as you girls said, you can't lose 2 hours, 3 hours of your life every day stuck in commute, and the stress that it all adds up to. It's a recipe for disaster. So for most tech companies like us, this has become the new normal. In fact, it's the new norm. It's no longer new. We've been doing it for the last 2 years now.
Wow, thank you, Mr. Menon. In fact, that brings me to our next guest, Bhavishya. Bhavishya, I wanted to talk to you about this topic that Mr. Menon raised about limiting talent pool, right? That's also something that the Airbnb founder and CEO said today, that we don't want to limit our talent pool. And, given our country situation where we have such good talent in deep pockets, everybody's not in tier 1 or tier 2 cities. So do you think a kind of a remote workplace model will actually help us have a very dynamic sort of a workforce working together to probably build better products?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, this is perhaps the most significant shift which will happen in workspace. This is the most significant disruption which has happened in workspace for the last so many years. And as Namit was talking about, that this definitely helps the local impact of avoiding logistics and being more effective. But I think a large purpose that this would serve eventually would also be to make the whole talent pool more global in nature. And I speak as an advisor to many organizations which are recruiting top talent across the globe. And we can see the tailwinds of it already in place. I mean, there are young organizations in India who are no longer looking at recruiting talent in Bangalore or Delhi, for instance, and they are looking at places like Estonia. They're looking at places like Paris, because now they can actually operate in a model which allows the individuals to work in different locations and be permanently remote. So I think one of the most significant impact that we would see by this disruption would be how the workplace would expand completely in a global dimension rather than being restricted to a local geography.
Sure, Bhavishya. I think I also want to bring in Naman once again. If you want to share your views about limiting talent pool kind of a situation, right? Because your company, I am guessing, is based out of Mumbai. So is there an opening in your company where you feel it is this kind of a model will make it easier for you to bring in better and more dynamic employees?
Sure. No, absolutely, Raksha. Look, I think today this idea of a company being based somewhere is getting obsolete. Of course, we have a registered office for compliance purposes, and that becomes the de facto base. But I think our team members are everywhere, and that's been a huge boost in terms of adding human resources from across the globe, across the country, because talent doesn't necessarily have a cluster. Right? Unlike industries that may have a cluster, talent today is actually scattered across the globe. And it's often the case that a particular kind of talent that you're looking at is in fact clustered in a geography which is very different from yours. So I think what remote working does is that, particularly for a remote first company, right? So I think there's the hybrid model and there's the remote first model. Particularly if you're remote first, I think the avenues you have to find a greater talent pool and attract them to your company are significantly greater. But of course, if you are working with a hybrid model where this particular employee's presence is extremely important, then that's not an option for you. That's been our view.
Right. Thanks for that, Naman. I want to quickly go across to Abhay now. Abhay, just to start with, what are your views on everything that Brain Chesky has written about today on his Twitter feed? What are your views on this entire model that he suggested that Airbnb is going to follow from now on?
Thank you so much for having us here in the panel. Airbnb, we have to understand how this company grow and how they become Airbnb. They were primarily a tech company, and virtually everything happens in that one. So primarily because of that, they are very further startup who can offer remote working for employees. But again, it's a kind of environment where not everybody learn quickly. The learning ability, the adaptiveness, and understanding infrastructure and policies, going with the workflow is quite difficult into this parameter. So there has to be some very, very well crafted plan and very, very high-tech technology where everything can be tracked should come into effect once you adopt this technology. Coming to the scenario of India, where we have such a huge population, and I agree, the potential of people are there in all kind of cities. It's not only tier 1 or tier 2 cities. But at the end of the day, how you nurture the talent or how you can bring to next level is again one of the most important thing which company has to look. Once they force remote working, or once they enforce the remote working for all the employees. So in this spectrum, remote working is kind of a great way you give them a benefit where they can save time, they can get login on their on their system and work from any place. But at the end of the day, how you nurture a talent, how you can grow them to next level is again a very debatable topic, because at the end of the day, we all are human beings and we like to socialize, we like to talk to each other. So that social connect always goes missing. Once you work into remote working, you go into a very robotic way, and you do your task, you finish your task, and then you sign off. The human touch is not there. So I believe it's a very good start, but it has to go into a long way. There has to be a lot of things which will come into effect, and especially once we talk about metaverse, where a lot of things which will happen into metaverse. So probably there could be some kind of virtual remote office where people can connect very regularly, and they can meet up and have conferences and have the ideology sharing. This could help bringing this gap together and groom up the people.
Very interesting, Abhay. Wow, you took us to this metaverse now where we're all thinking of, virtual offices where we could all meet and have our regular water cooler and tea conversations, which, to be honest, us at Mirror now, we've been working out of office for a very long time now because, to put these shows together for our viewers. But as you interestingly said, I just want to add that Brain Chesky has also said that the most meaningful connections happen in person, and Zoom is great for maintaining relationships, but it's not the best way to deepen them. So Rajgopal, I just want to come back to you because you told us that when you joined, of course, Nishchal shared that your entire work time will be remote. But do you at times feel this, that at times, you might want to meet your team members and your colleagues on site? Do you have any kind of a current situation where you probably do a little bit of off-site or you do a quarterly meet? What is your model like?
For us, Raksha, what happens is that, for example, the Mumbai employees, all of us get together typically once a month. We come to a place in BKC. Whichever is more convenient. So some of us, once the first meeting or a meeting couple of months ago was in Andheri West, which it is if people who are from Mumbai will understand how beautiful heading to Andheri West is. So here we have these meetups where a bunch of us get together and work through the day. We actually block a cafe, and there are about 6 seats. We actually sit in a Starbucks and work through the day. Come in at 11 and work till 6 o'clock. This is an unofficial meetup that we have. What the company also does is that once a month, not actually once a month, once a quarter. This has just started recently, where we have meetups where employees can fly in from wherever they are. All of us meet up, have a good time, speak to everybody. So the interaction happens. There is a face to the name. You meet the person in flesh, and it's not just a virtual person that you're meeting in your Google Meets and your Zoom calls. You have a good time and you head. But the entire thing is that if you look at our lives anyway, most of it is online. Okay, and what the COVID pandemic has taught us is that 2 years of our life we spent online. This is just an extension of that. It is not rocket science. Your meetings happen online. Things sometimes take longer, I admit, but all you have to do is pick up the phone and say, "Arey boss, kar le yaar," and it happens. So we also have our water cooler moments. So, typically, there is this social media kid who handles our accounts and suddenly says, "Chalo, let's meet for coffee." And all of us nurse a cup of coffee and then just gossip for about 15 minutes and then head back to our day. So whatever we do typically in an offline setting is replicated in in a remote working environment. And let me tell you, Raksha and Archana, there's no greater pleasure than, sending your son off to school and, not stuck in a traffic jam. That is the best boon of remote working.
Rajgopal, I completely agree with you. I'm going to also cite a personal story here, because during the last 2 years of the pandemic, I was also somebody who in between was working remotely, and I got a chance to actually live in an Airbnb for a few months and work out of, and wake up to a beach view and then listen to some old music and sort of before we start the day at work. And I felt it that I am way more productive. I'm way more excited about going to work. But talking about that, I read a news report, and whoever wants to come in on it actually can. I read a news report which said that because Airbnb has been trying to, because they don't own any property themselves, right? They only sort of align with others. So Naman, maybe I can start with you about that, and then you guys can also join in. But a lot of people said that this is actually his model to promote work from home, so that more employees, such as I myself, can then move on to take up an Airbnb and get to work out of there. So I think this is a great business model also to begin with, if that is his PR stunt. What do you have to say about that, Naman?
Well, look, I mean, anything that a tech CEO says these days will be viewed through the PR lens, right? But that aside, I think if you look at the sum total of Brain Chesky's tweets, I think he makes a very cogent case, and he strikes a very good balance when he's talking about moving to this model where he's given his team members flexibility. He's talking about building culture in extremely tangible ways, despite culture itself being an intangible. He's talking about, the product shipping discipline, which they'd like to adhere to. So I think he's anticipated the kind of things that are going to be needed to make this work. At the same time, of course, it's very on brand, right? So more than a stunt, I think, what he's doing and what a lot of other tech companies are doing that have a mature product that can afford to actually, maintain a particular culture yet succeed with a hybrid model. They're all trying to move in the same direction. So I don't, find this to be a mischievous move. I think this is a very interesting, some would argue a belated move. because of the way in which it liberates people. And once people have tasted flexibility, it's hard to take them back to what used to be a permanent office culture. And I think he anticipates things which may not work, right? Zoom fatigue being one, which is why he's advocating teams to meet in person. And that's a very real thing, right? I mean, companies that are solely going to rely on that will see pushback, because Zoom meetings can be very demanding, particularly if you have
Absolutely, and the screen fatigue is also real. But as you rightly said, Naman, and I think I want to end this debate on that after a while, after having tasted work from home, it's going to be very difficult for most employees to actually come back to a very regular office-going model, which is what a lot of our friends and families are already talking about. But Airbnb's move is definitely something for us to look at and consider and think whether this is something that can be a feasible model also for at least new age companies going forward. Thank you everyone for joining me on this debate. And guys, stay tuned to Mirror Now and more news coming up. Thank you.